The missing person posters started appearing before anyone went missing. At first, we thought it was some kind of mistake, even a childish prank. But then we started recognizing the faces. Sarah from the coffee shop, Oliver, who walks his dogs every morning, people who were still very much alive, still going about their daily routines. Completely unaware, their faces were plastered on telephone poles and trees, with the word missing on them. The dates on the posters were always exactly 7 days in the future, and 7 days later, without fail, they would vanish. No trace, no explanation, just empty spaces where people used to be. This is just one type of story that you might hear by Michael Alexander on Strange Tales and Unusual Circumstances, where the impossible becomes inevitable and the ordinary becomes terrifying. Some stories are too strange to ignore. This third strange tale, titled The Eldritch Occurrence on Westwood Isle, blends Native American folklore, family legacy, and the perilous pursuit of the truth. It explores an unusual circumstance where reality can blur with myth. It's a warning of what can unfold when rules are ignored. However, is this reality or just another story? Listening discretion is advised.
The Eldritch Occurrence on Westwood Isle by Michael Alexander. Everyone has a story. Some are more interesting than others. Occasionally, there's one that's so unique it can't be real. It makes the listener question what was heard. Was the story fabricated or possibly exaggerated? Even just an overactive imagination. However, some things are to remain a mystery, and sometimes the truth can be just stranger than fiction. Consider this to be one of those stories. Papa Ben and the farm meant everything to Francis. Tragedy struck early in life for him. A fatal car accident took the lives of his parents, leaving his grandparents, Ben Cowan, a corn farmer and a storyteller by heart, and Olivia Cowan, a homemaker, God bless her soul, as legal guardians of the 2-year-old boy. Bedridden and propped up with pillows, the weakened tone of Ben addressed his 18-year-old grandson standing in the doorway. His words are interrupted by a violent cough that has Francis fetching the glass of water on the nightstand. The old man's hands tremble, lowering the plaid handkerchief from his mouth, bringing the straw to his lips. "Sit, my boy, sit." Taking a seat at his grandfather's bedside, the man places his hands on his grandson's, sandwiching Francis in between. The thinning of Papa Ben's skin reveals the frailty of age, calluses worn down from his long absence from hard labor, which his body can no longer endure. "You know, boy, life's one big journey. For 78 years, I've carried a secret. Do you remember those stories I used to tell you when we went bird watching?" Francis nods his head. Tears begin to pool as he reminisces, summoning vivid images from the archives of memory tucked deep within his mind, each one waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. This one beats them all. In the blink of an eye, the memory dissipated. Francis is now 51, and he stands at the edge staring into the abyss. To the locals, it's known as No Man's Land. The Alaskan tundra, harsh, remote, and utterly unforgiving. He's a month late for his expedition. He should have begun in March, but preparation took longer than expected. This place, by all means, wasn't a place for the faint-hearted. Dressed from head to toe in the warmest thermal gear money can buy. A plain black ball cap hides his long graying hair, and over top, the hood of his red jacket. In a backpack, the necessities needed for survival are inside, and over his shoulder, a rifle for safety. To shield his eyes from the sun's blinding reflection, he wears a pair of polarized goggles. A bushel of a beard protects his face from the night's frigid temperatures and unpredictable weather. It may be warm now, but you can't be fooled. When nightfall comes during any season, it can be enough to kill a man. Even the ones deemed the country's leading experts in the field of survival. The man takes a deep breath in preparation for the long journey that lied ahead. Exhaling, he adjusts his heavily tinted goggles and ice axe holsters attached to his thermal pants. Fastening the waist buckle of his pack, he removes a portable GPS device from his pocket. Pressing the record button on the GoPro strapped to his chest for documentation purposes, Francis takes his step. Officially entering, and now vulnerable to the dangers within the Alaskan wild, his memory shifted back to that time. In the closet under the floorboards, you'll find a box. Bring it to me. Papa Ben coughed in another violent episode. Tucked at the back of the area's confines, young Francis finds a row of loosened floorboards. Slowly and one by one, he removes the pieces, stacking a total of 6 boards. As he peers into the hole, a wooden box secured with an antique padlock silently forbids entry. Removing the object from its resting place, the disturbance of old dust makes the boy sneeze. Wiping away the particles, a beautiful mahogany wood is revealed. I haven't seen this in over 50 years. The man placed his hand on the box that now sits on his lap, and a single tear trickles down his cheek before it's quickly wiped away. Sniffling, the man turns towards his nightstand, speaking to his grandson again. I meant for this to happen a long time ago, but I kept putting it off. Turning back and trying to keep his tremors steady, he holds a large yellow envelope in both hands. But we always have time for one last story, he smiles. What's in it? A variety of creative thoughts begin to run through Francis's mind. It's my story, son. The old man is more eager than ever before to share something from his past. He was notorious for changing the subject whenever his childhood was brought up in conversation. Grandma Cowan would explain that the man was very private. He never did like talking about himself. Open it! Francis's heart raced with anticipation, still pondering on the thought of what can be concealed in the box. By the paper container's weight, a heavy object sits at the bottom. The depth of the parcel's compartment has the teen fishing all the way to his elbow before finally reaching the bottom. Clasping onto the item, his hand emerges holding an old skeleton key. Inserting the flat and serrated edge into the lock, it's turned gently and with care. The first night into older Francis's exhibition, he's presented with nature's own art exhibit. With his shelter made from driftwood and sealskin directly behind him, the translucent and spherical streaks of vibrant and ultraviolet colors displayed across the night sky are a spectacular sight. Though Francis has no interest, illuminated by the flames of a crackling fire, he gazes at a brown book, bound in leather, and a tribal necklace with a large animal claw. That necklace you hold was given to me by the tribe's people living in the Alaskan territory. It was to keep me safe on my travels. Supposedly, it came from an unknown creature that terrorized the native communities. Young Francis placed the necklace back into the mahogany box, now retrieving a brown leather book. Flipping through the pages, he sees the book is filled with writing and illustrations. 2 particular drawings of weird-looking creatures stood out, a large shadow-like bird and the other, a sketch of what resembles a Sasquatch. There are strange creatures out there. The forest people can be seen during the midnight sun and the thunderbird during the polar nights. The last item removed is a folded map. Scribbled on the discolored paper are coordinates. The material is so frail that precautions had to be taken while it was opened. This place can only be reached on foot. It takes almost 4 seasons to get there from beginning to end. The elements were horrendous, and if that didn't stop you, the isolation, the animals, and the land was enough to send anyone into mortal peril. This place has been held in secrecy. Legend has it that in 1702, before Alaska was even discovered, Captain William Westwood, an English explorer, his crew, and their wenches got lost at sea. When the tide receded, their ship became aground, forcing them to travel on foot. Taking what they could from their vessel, they journeyed into the unknown, logging in scripture every step of the way. Months later, they would find Heaven's Gate. Outside the mouth of the cave, a symbol chiseled in the rock face of a circle with a cross inside could be seen. Beyond, a beautiful place was ready to be discovered. A small body of water acted as a moat around the isle. The captain knew this was a perfect place to start his colony. Soon after, there would be visitors. The tribespeople from the area gave Captain Westwood and the others permission to stay. These were the chosen ones prophesied and spoken about in hieroglyphs discovered centuries ago in a nearby place. The indigenous clan was to show Westwood the way. Teaching them the dialect of the bloodline was included. In return, they would trade goods with them, and this continued even when I lived there, and we continued to live by the same moral code. Westwood would be told that the land was sacred, filled with all the necessities to live. It was expressed, and it wasn't up for debate, that absolutely no outsiders were to know about this place, ever. They were to live off the land, and only take what was needed. Not only were they to respect the mother of life at all times, but also they were to respect the gifts that nature brings. Never were they to be tempted by greed. If the rules were broken, the person or persons would be exiled to face the elements alone, to be punished by Mother Nature herself. If one were to think they could hide deceit, they were wrong. The spirits would speak. This was an ancient wisdom passed on by the ancient ancestors. When the chief of the tribe was asked about the carving, he replied that it was a prehistoric symbol, a message by a great chief living on sacred land, high up in the mountains called Zaltana. The circle represented the endless land, and the cross inside represented the crossroads between happiness and sorrow in one's own universe. It served as a reminder never to stray from ancient ideologies, for in the end, the settlers were authors of their own fate. Also, the newcomers were to treat everyone equally. That meant women had equal rights as well. This was long before modern civilization came to its senses, mind you. Women were given leadership roles across 3 evenly split groups: fishing, hunting, and horticulture. Pairing every man with a woman for companionship purposes, the groups lived in separate corners of the isle, though they worked together like a fine-tuned machine. A century after precious metals were discovered throughout Heaven's Gate, the colony began to flourish. The chosen settlers eventually established a 4th and 5th township, built on the industries of lumber and mining. To transport goods, horses and buggies were traded in, and were soon replaced by dog sleds, better suited to the harsh terrain. This place is called Westwood Isle. I was 10 when something happened. No, not just strange. Strange doesn't quite capture it. Eldritch is the word. I was only 10 when something so eldritch occurred that it forced me to flee. Just speaking about it pulls me right back there. It was July 1947, and only a few weeks remained for the midnight sun. Young Ben lies in the grass outside his log cabin. He's the son of Peter and Abigail North, 2 members of the logging township. He waits for his father and the others to finish packing the supplies needed for their trip to trade goods with the native clan. Watching the clouds, he creates a story from the shapes forming in the sky. His power of imagination turns the condensed water vapor into creatures. Abruptly and out of nowhere, the animals become agitated and disgruntled, making young Ben lose his concentration. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he witnesses 4 metallic, saucer-like discs flying at low altitude, making no sound as they pass by. It would be many years later when Ben finally had a theory of what exactly that strange phenomenon was that day. It was a reconnaissance team searching for the downed ship that crashed in Roswell. Their base was stationed under the ice and snow somewhere out there. On the 7th day of their travels, and by mid-afternoon, Ben, Peter, and his helpers aren't far from home. Stopping once again, Peter has his son look over a map with coordinates while he measures them for accuracy. Cartography was a hobby of Peter's. His father taught him at a young age. Waiting for the numbers to be called out, a bald eagle emits a high-pitched call. The noise caught the others' attention, but they quickly lost interest. Ben continues to watch the animal as it glides through the air over the proximity of the isle before dropping dead in mid-flight. Corkscrewing with its wings at its side, it plummets headfirst and vanishes within the dense greenery of the forest's canopy. Ben didn't think much of it. There were no gunshots, and bald eagles were off limits to hunt due to their spiritual connection with the tribe's people. The plausible answer was that it died of natural causes. It wouldn't be until they got to Heaven's Gate that Ben felt something was off. The horses reared before entering, forcing the group to carry everything by hand. Days passed, then people began reporting severe headaches. Like a domino effect, one by one, everyone on the isle experienced it but Ben. The peculiar thing about these headaches was that once a new person received the mysterious pain, the previous victim's symptoms disappeared. It was then, at the end of the midnight sun, that the Eldritch occurrence took place. Ben and a little girl named Wendy, from within the township, play hide-and-seek within the nearby woods. It's now Ben's turn to seek. Creeping through the thicket, off in the distance beyond the large monumental tree that had lost its strength from a past storm, and now is supported by another tree larger than itself, he seeks the hider. "Hey, you're not even trying," Ben yelled, approaching the girl who stood still, her back turned and arms at her sides. "What are you doing?" he then says, before rubbing up against her. The little girl's body rocks back and forth, becoming off balance. Mannequin-like, she fell face first to the forest ground, her body lying stiff. Wendy, this isn't funny. Turning the little girl over, her flesh is a dull gray. Her eyes are wide open, but with no sign of life left. The mysterious event has left them milky white. Fleeing the heavily wooded area and nearly tripping on several occasions, young Ben scuttles to get help. Both fathers initially thought it was a joke, but Ben's troubled expression quickly revealed something serious had happened. After retrieving the girl, Peter, Ben, and the distraught father, who carries the stiff body of his daughter, stood peering at a ghastly sight. The people of the logging township were all frozen in time, statue-like, stiff in their current postures while doing their tasks for that day. Abigail, his wife, comes to mind. Sprinting, followed by Ben in pursuit, leaves the distraught and confused father at the edge of the forest. The loving mother and wife mentioned earlier that morning that she'd be visiting the fishing township that day. With only that knowledge, Peter frantically runs in that direction. Every member of the community who has the same appearance is observed. A grayish skin tone and milky white eyes. The illness hadn't only affected the people on the isle, but it had also impacted animals as well. Many have been injured while traveling, though the crystallization of bodily fluids prevents them from bleeding out. The controlled fires now burn out of control, turning structures into fiery infernos, leaving the people burned beyond recognition. For the other victims, they have simply fallen over, caused by the force of their momentum suddenly halting. Entering the fishery, bodies float in the water while others are frozen on land. Some were in the middle of casting fishing lines, while others removed the fish from their hooks. In a panic, they search every building and corner of the area, but they come up empty. Peter begins to fear the worst. Was his wife one of the unlucky ones whose skin was melted by the fires? Finally, Abigail's found. She never made it to the fishery. Instead, she's within the horticultural township collecting vegetables. The ground's littered with fruits and vegetables, and the others, well, they're also frozen on display. Arms reach out to pick the ripened goods, while others fill their baskets for transport. In front of a harvest of ripened tomatoes, Abigail stands with her back to both the father and son, a small basket snugged underneath her arm, filled with the produce. Peter falls to his knees, nearly tipping over his wife in the process. Ben, on the other hand, stood in disbelief. His lips quiver before blurting out the word, "Mom?" A few days into the midnight sun, Francis confronts the first real obstacle on his exploration. Finally exiting the forest after miles of traveling across the endless plains, he stands before the last of nature's warnings. It's in the form of a fast-flowing river, swelling from the thaw of ice and snow. On the other side, caribou graze in lush pastures of plants and flowers, beneath a sun that neither rises nor sets. Scanning the vicinity for any dangers, within the brush, he notices movement. Unable to know exactly what type of animal is blending in with the bushels and brush growing up from the Alaskan floor, he guesses it can only be a predator. Retrieving his binoculars, he looks to the east. There's in fact a predator lurking. A pack of wolves is hiding patiently throughout the environment, awaiting the perfect opportunity to strike. The alpha male stands just out of sight with its tongue visible, panting as it searches for the weakest link of the herd. Drawing his attention beyond the wolves, he focuses on the forest. Two silhouettes outlining a human figure stand just a couple of yards from the tree line. The assumption is that they had to be the tribe's people Papa Ben wrote about in the book. Every description of landmarks amid that protective slab of brown, bounded leather had been precise from the start. From a medical standpoint, it seemed his mind had finally grasped the profound isolation of the voyage, coupled with the relentless psychological and physical strain his body had already endured. He began to think he conjured a fata morgana, a mirage born of hallucination, shaped into the one thing humanity craves most, social connection. The probability that he's actually seeing a mirage is underweighted by the remaining factors hypothesized during his observation. He must continue in that specific direction. The distant forestry is also a landmark described in the book. With no visible material in his reach to make a raft, he must double back towards the forest and construct one. Though the length of time voyaging across the Alaskan territory has exhausted Francis, resting for a little while will be best for him to rejuvenate before he continues. Peter and Ben continue to stare at Abigail's backside. Reaching out, the upset husband tugs at his wife's garments, but is stopped by his son. "Don't! You might hurt her." The father retracts his arm, advancing to his wife's front side. The man begins to sob harder, looking at his wife's appearance. Is she dead? Ben is struggling to get his question out through his blubbering. Peter rubs the tears away before standing to his feet. Checking his wife's pulse, he can feel one, but only faintly. Listening closely, a continuous exhaling noise comes out of her mouth. "Go get John while I get her home. Meet me back there, and son, be careful." The man speaks while trying to find the safest angle to lift his wife. It would be too late by the time Ben returns to the tree line. The man still holds his little girl, but he too has fallen victim to the same unexplained condition. Returning home, Peter sits at Abigail's bedside with candles lighting the room. Pondering on what may have caused this eldritch occurrence, one explanation is that a virus lay dormant and was unearthed by the miners. The other was that someone had broken one of the specific rules given to Captain Westwood, and now they were all being punished. By sunrise and after a restless night, Ben goes to visit his father. Peter's still at his wife's bedside, though now the candles have burnt out and consist only of a pile of melted wax. Greeting his father, Ben receives no response. The boy's first thought was that he was sleeping. However, the haunting reality is that sometime during the night, Peter too had fallen victim to the Eldritch occurrence. I knew I had to leave the isle before the same thing happened to me. Packing the necessities for my departure, along with this box and the map, I left. I was completely alone, scared, and confused about what had happened. What I didn't know was that the chief of the indigenous people saw everything unfold through a vision and sent out a handful of men to find me. Afraid to enter the mouth of the cave, they waited outside Heaven's Gate for my arrival. The tribe's shaman greets Ben. Placing his palms outwards, he closes his eyes, raising his head slowly towards the sky. In native dialect, he begins chanting under his breath, a mantra phrase. He repeats the words which bring him into a trance-like state, the ritualistic healing to rid the boy of any evil energies from the isle his body may contain. Reaching an altered state of consciousness, the Axis Mundi will connect him with heaven and earth, evoking the great spirits of his ancestors, asking them for their guidance and protection. Upon our return to the clan's territory, I'd be told by the chief that the event that occurred had no explanation, and he didn't know why I was the lone survivor. The spirits or the land weren't providing any answers to his questions. A strong sensation of being watched comes over Francis while traveling on the opposite side of the fast-flowing river. Hearing movement within the thick vegetation only meant one thing. The natives he had observed the day before must be keeping a watchful eye on him. Their territory must be close. That's why he's being stalked. Continuing his travels, the disturbance of branches caught his attention. Before he can take his next step, two spears penetrate the ground in a crisscross pattern. "Alone! Alone!" he called out in Yupik, a language Papa Ben taught him at a young age. From within the overgrowth, the hostiles armed with spears, bows, and arrows emerged from their environment in what can only be described as their version of a ghillie suit made from moss, leaves, and branches. Slowly and cautiously, he raised his hands while they approached him in all directions. Repeating the Yupik dialect, he then pointed to the necklace that's around his neck. Removing the item, he held it out in front of him. In silence, they exchanged glances, each face marked by ambivalence. One man stepped forward and seized the artifact with force. This wasn't his first encounter with hostile individuals. Years of travel through exotic, volatile regions had made him a seasoned veteran in unpredictable terrain. But every time he encountered something like this, there were demands. Nevertheless, for the first time in his life, he felt he didn't have control of the situation. Binding his hands behind his back, they take the voyager hostage. On their travels, they only stare. Not a word is spoken, making the capture feel uneasy. The abundance of shelters he set sights on when they arrive back in the village amazed the man. Fires crackle outside their animal skin shelters, as the community quietly carried out the day's essential tasks. Children play while others help their mothers and elders. 3 long wooden posts stand tall in the middle of the village, with an extinguished fire pit and a cauldron in front. The uncivilized society froze with the return of the men and their captive. The air became silent, with only the sounds of barks and whines coming from the snow dogs from within their pens. Slowly, they walk towards Francis, intrigued and fascinated. They have likely only heard stories of the white man and never seen one in the flesh. Pointing and staring, they talk amongst themselves. With the amount of you-pick chatter happening all at once, he's unable to translate what they are saying. Forced to his knees, he placed the pack at his side. They direct the tips of their spears inches away from his neck. A telltale warning that if there's resistance, it'll end badly. Beside him are the wooden posts, and across from those, a caribou skin shelter. Glancing beside him, Francis can now see what's fastened to those wooden objects. A chilling sense crept in. He might not make it out alive. 3 human bodies are fastened to the poles. Their stages of decomposition make it impossible to tell if they're men or women. Disemboweled and skinned to the bone, what remained of them was left to perish over time. Francis can only begin to wonder, were those people an enemy tribe, traitors amongst their own, or were they travelers like himself? Curiosity about what's concealed in the bag caused the elders to rummage through it. Throwing the items onto the forest floor created a frenzy amongst the others. The man holding the necklace had to be a man of authority because the brown book and the map were passed to him. Looking down at the items, he turns and proceeds to enter the caribou-skinned shelter, disappearing behind the flap of the entranceway. I would live amongst the tribe, and was treated like I was one of their own. Frail Ben takes another sip of water through the straw, after another violent coughing episode. However, this time, blood is visible on the plaid handkerchief he holds. The polar nights were a weird time for anyone who experienced it, even the ones living in the cities. Seasonal affective disorder was the most common case. No sun for that length of time could drive anyone mad. Inside an animal skin shelter, young Ben slept soundly. A small fire crackled beside him, just enough to cast a warm glow and hold back the cold. Wrapped in the thick fur of a grizzly bear, his prize from a first kill, he stirred as a whisper slipped through the silence, calling his name. Still incoherent, the voice calls out again. The voice isn't loud enough to make him alert, but the small tug on the blanket is. Rubbing his eyes to regain focus, the animal footwear bound to a person's feet standing outside is quickly recognized. "Hello!" In a whisper, the voice responds. "We need to talk. Come," the man stated. Ben's heart raced as he saw the holy man standing solemnly, torch in hand. Come, we must talk." The elder kept quiet as he walked Ben several yards away from the sleeping village. Standing directly underneath a dying gap in the tree's canopy, a dim whooshing and swooshing noise becomes clear. The sound can only be described as a powerful presence that is generating wind. As he drew closer, the nearby branches and leaves began to shiver in a wave-like motion, sending ripples through the canopy of greenery in every direction. The chief pointed to his lips and then to the sky. Ben looked up into the night to see a black mass fly overhead. For a brief moment, the powerful wind forced them off balance, and once again the air became silent. "What was that?" The boy is amazed. His adrenaline caused him to tremble from what he just witnessed. That was Thunderbird. Only the lucky ones have witnessed its existence. It is said that it sometimes grants humans favors. Maybe you'll receive a gift. I didn't bring you out here just for this. I also brought you out here to speak with you in private. The chief responded with an expression of sorrow. Did I do something wrong? No, you are a fine young man. But I'm sorry to tell you this, but once spring comes, you must leave here. The spirits have spoken. Young Francis became saddened, bowing his head to the chief's words. You do realize this isn't punishment. You deserve much more than living here. You will make the tribe proud by accepting this. I have seen you in a vision, having a family on your own on the plains of endless farmland. You are happy and providing unconditional love to the future generation of your family name. This is your destiny, and you staying with us will strip you of that. Ben became upset and then expressed an episode of anger towards the chief's remarks. In the end, the chief, the spirits, and the land have spoken. The decision was final. Commotion broke out after Francis noticed his grandfather's urn being unveiled from the confines of the backpack. Rushing out from the shelter is a man of authority, accompanied by another figure whom Francis instinctively recognized as the true leader. His animal fur garments were adorned with trinkets, and his unkempt hair threaded with charms. In Francis's hands are the 3 sacred objects his grandfather entrusted to him. It's also evident by the people becoming silent and them kneeling when the man presented himself. The chief yelled, speaking in the tribe's dialect. From what Francis can translate, the man has ordered all his belongings back into the bag. The man is then helped to his feet before the chief personally cuts the material binding his hands. This was a good sign that he wasn't going to end up like those 3 individuals strapped to the posts on display. Most of his personal belongings had now arrived back at his side. A child still wore his jacket, 3 times bigger than the boy himself. A man studied the GoPro, a foreign piece of technology to him, which clearly puzzles him by its purpose. Comical within itself, an elder woman wears the polarized goggles, lifting them to her eyes and back down again. She was amazed by the safety protection's tint. I have been waiting for your arrival. There's a raspy tone mixed with a strong indigenous accent present. Escorting him into his own shelter, the elder insists that he takes a seat. Francis takes in the caribou-skinned shelter, its interior draped with trinkets, sacred relics, and animal skulls. But it's the human skulls, dozens of them, arranged along the base, that stir unease in his chest. One, perched on a pedestal behind him, cradles the chief's headdress like a grim crown. I saw your face outside when you looked at the deceased fastened to those poles. What you may perceive to be barbaric or inhumane is normal in our culture. Those people you saw outside volunteered to be consumed when they went into the spirit world. It is also seen as a great honor to do this deed. They provided us with food when food became scarce during the winter months. Because of them, we were able to save others from starvation. These skulls you see are the heads of our past chiefs. One day, my skull will be a part of decorating the next leader's shelter too. I have to ask, how did you come into possession of these objects? This one here, especially. This was given to a boy many years ago by my father. The chief pointed behind him and to the skull that supports the headdress on the wooden pillar. You are too young in age to be that boy. They were my grandfather's. They were given to me by him before his passing. And that object you showed anger towards, that is your grandfather? Yes, I want to return him to his rightful home. And that device you carry is to record your journey? The explorer nods, keeping the secret of the chance to profit from this discovery to himself. In return, the man had asked that the GoPro remain unused until he left. Francis nods, honoring the holy man's request, aware that he's already recorded a fleeting glimpse of these people's existence before being taken into their custody. This great land holds many secrets, and it's a land of unexplained mysteries. Some are beyond the realm of what outsiders would perceive as reality. Some of these can be a place where a society lives, unlike any other, or an encounter with strange creatures like this claw you possess. The elder holds up the claw necklace between his fingers. Francis can also read between the lines. The chief was telling him that Westwood Isle does truly exist. This here is from a creature, neither man nor beast, but something in between, more wolf-like. A creature so violent that the ancestors were obligated many centuries ago to remove it from this land. During the months of the polar nights, it would stalk and prey on our people. No animal was safe either. Even the most powerful that roamed the land were defenseless when confronted. 3 of my best men will escort you to the edge of the forest. They will be with you for 44 days, and beyond that, you are on your own. This is after you get some rest, of course. The land is a beautiful sight when looking from afar, but it takes no prisoners once you enter. Talking for a little bit longer before being given a shelter, an offering in the form of a peace pipe, carved from wood and decorated with feathers, was passed. Inside the bowl, the unknown substance had a sweet scent. From his past experience, Francis is aware that turning this offering down is a disrespect to not only the chief but the entire tribe. Even if there is an intoxicating effect from the inhalation of the smoke, declining it can result in him being a decorative piece strapped to a pole outside. While Francis was asleep, the chief looked through the book and called upon the council for a meeting. Inside the chief's confines, a panel of elders filled the space. Comforted by a small fire, the leader addressed his people in the Yupik dialect. The spirits have confirmed my intuition. Speaking to the voyager, I know his journey at the beginning was sincere, but over time his thoughts became corrupted. We must give a warning through our summoning and dancing ritual. With that device, he'll reveal things that are to remain unknown. He must not leave the isle. but they must allow him to bring his grandfather's ashes back to his rightful home. An elder woman asks to speak freely. Her request is granted. The voyager's been consumed by the notion of greed, a chance to profit from his journey. After a few hours of rest, they wake him. Becoming coherent, the sounds of drumming and wailing chants in the background become clear. As he stepped out of the shelter, Francis's eyes adjust to the shifting light. Regaining focus, he sees men and women of all ages dancing in rhythmic sequence around a roaring fire. A powerful display of cultural tradition, driven by the pulse of hand-beaten drums. The wailing and chanting swell and quicken in tempo. Then, emerging from the crowd, the chief approached, cradling a bowl fashioned from a human skull. His face is eerily painted, a white base smeared with black ash and streaks of blood lining his cheeks. Without a word, he blows a fine yellow-tinged powder into Francis's face. Darkness takes him, and he collapses onto the forest floor. Waking up with no recollection of what happened, Francis lies in the darkened shelter, trying to revisit any memories from the day before. However, it's just a foggy haze. In the background, the community has already started their chores. Beside him are his personal belongings packed in his bag. In a frenzy, the bag is searched for specific items. The map, necklace, and book are found tucked into a smaller compartment, alongside the urn still safely secured, just as he had left it. In a sleeper's daze, the entrance's flap is pulled back. The chief and the 3 men he promised equipped for their travel approached. Francis first greets the chief before asking what had happened to him the night before. "You reacted to the blessing we gave you for your travels. Don't worry, we have seen it in the past. You should be well rested for your journey, though you slept for over a day," the chief responded. Francis is wary of the words the holy man spoke, but the loss of time is confirmed when he looks at his watch. On the 40th day of their journey, deep within the sprawling forest, the group descends a rocky embankment and arrives at a stream. Once frozen, the channels of fresh water now flow freely with the onset of warmer weather. Erosion from persistent moisture has exposed the gnarled, irregular roots of nearby trees, twisting across the ground like ancient veins. Pausing at the water's edge to refill their canteens, one of the men glanced downstream. Catching his attention, he gestures toward a dark shape on the opposite bank, roughly 150 yards away. Judging by its size and posture, it appears to be a black bear drinking from the stream. Continuing to watch, the animal sensed something. It smelt the air and then looked in the men's direction before standing bipedal. Its long arms drop long past its knees and sway from side to side while leaving the rocky bed to find cover within the thicket. Its abnormally large stature makes it sluggish. Paranoid at the sight of humans, it continuously looked back to see if it was being followed. The encounter raised the hairs on Francis's neck. Not expecting to become an eyewitness to one of the strange creatures the Alaskan land holds. And of course, he has an opportunity to capture footage of one of mankind's greatest mysteries, and he's forbidden to record. "Holy shit, did you see that thing? It's only a forest person. They mean no harm." The indigenous man dismissed the sight as if it were nothing unusual, no more remarkable than spotting a deer in the wild. Later on at camp, there's a foul smell in the air, resembling the odor of a wet dog. Getting the sense he's being watched, Francis's intuition guides him to a specific location. Hearing the cracking of branches and disturbance within the overgrowth, he catches a glimpse of a man's dark and broad shoulder taking cover behind a tree. Changing his line of sight, the outline of another creature stood in the distance. The shape stands still, trying to blend in with its environment. The natives would say they are watching to make sure the stranger is respecting nature and the land. They were known as protectors of the wild. 3 sets of heavy footsteps are heard approaching the camp from 3 separate directions, making Francis feel uneasy. Looking over his shoulder and blending in with the scenery, he noticed 3 creatures staring at him in a crouching position. Calling out to the others now with his rifle in hand, the indigenous men ignored Francis's words. When he brought up his concern again, one of the men, while resting his eyes, replied, "The forest people have been following us since we left, and most definitely been watching you since you began your journey. They have curiosity about why you visit the place they call home. Leave them be, and in time they'll go. You may want to lower that weapon of yours. They could perceive you as a threat," another man suggested. Early the next morning, Francis awoke to a rumbling sound coming from within the forest. The stampede-like sound gets closer and now piques his curiosity. drawing back the entrance flap to his shelter, and right before he sticks his head out, a herd of deer gallop through his camp, and some are just inches away from his tent. A rush of adrenaline overwhelms him, knowing he nearly just lost his head. Exiting, he leaves his rifle behind. Hearing a series of faint growls, he turns, coming face to face with a pack of wolves, their teeth exposed and their muzzle wrinkled, ready to attack. The close call from the herd made him forget basic knowledge. The animals were most likely evading a predator, and he rang the dinner bell. Gradually, they move closer, before a sound in the distance startles them. The eerie series of whoops causes the pack to whimper before fleeing. In hindsight, he now knows what those animals sensed. It was the forest people. About a half hour later, with Francis on edge every minute, the forest people leave. The smell dissipates, allowing Francis to feel safe. 4 days later, and by mid-afternoon, the group stands at the forest's tree line, peering at the mountain backdrop that spans across the horizon. A break in the terrain stretches before them, halting their progress and forcing them to reconsider their path. The gap is miles wide and spans as far as the eyes can see. Turning, the men re-enter the forest. They come to an area that appears to be a mound of deadfall before they peel back the material that's concealing a rock slab. Sliding the heavy object aside, they uncover a manhole with stone steps descending into a dark tunnel. You must travel this way to find Westwood Isle. From here, you are on your own. Francis removed his high-powered flashlight from his pack and began his descent. The light from the opening above fades as the men slide the slab back into place, sealing the entrance behind them. "Hey, how do I get back through?" Francis called out as the entrance was resealed. With no other choice, he continues forward. On the tunnel walls, ancient and mysterious hieroglyphs tell tales, but what they read is unknown. Some pictures depict a spacecraft and alien beings. However, that's only an assumption. All of this is new. This was never described in his grandfather's book, and unfortunately, for some reason, his camera isn't working to capture this intriguing evidence either. Coming upon an opening and another set of stairs, he makes the long ascent, once again re-entering the unforgiving habitat. This here is one of the reasons why Francis has trained and educated himself for so long. 500 miles of open land. He must travel wisely and reach the mountains before the onset of the polar nights, staying ahead of winter's most brutal peak. Papa Ben was reaching the end of his story, and Francis had given his undivided attention through it all. Fascinated like always, the comparison of how more intrigued he is by this tale over the hundreds told before didn't even come close. It reminded him of childhood, sitting cross-legged on the floor or curled beneath the sheets, listening in a trance as vivid words and rich details unfolded like magic. I had reached the end of my journey with the indigenous people. It was time for me to continue my travels alone. The chief had now changed his mind and decided to join my departure. Standing at the edge of the tree line, the chief directed young Ben to keep traveling northeast, insisting the land will guide him to his destiny. "Your will and survival will be constantly tested. You must take this. It will keep you safe from the animals that may try to hunt you. They will sense this item and let you be." Passing the boy the claw necklace, they say their goodbyes. Leaving, the boy sets off eager to enter the world beyond the Alaskan wild, but scared to face the elements and obstacles that may lie ahead alone. My voyage lasted just into the 4th season. It was the middle of winter when I would be found. In British Columbia, Canada, a middle-aged man gathered some firewood located beside his home. The day before, a vicious storm swept through the area, bringing an abundance of unpredictable snow. Out past the acres of frozen and blanketed pasture and to the forest beyond, wolves howl in distress, which caught the man's attention. Losing interest, the man took his wood inside. By morning, when more wood needed to be gathered, the man stepped out to hear the same noises from the night before. With a shotgun in hand, the man takes the long walk to the edge of the forest. When he arrived at the tree line, the howls of distress had grown silent. The man scouted the area, though it's hard to see with everything blanketed in white. He stood there for some time waiting to hear the howls again. When he turned back to go home, that's when he finally heard the howls again. The man stealthily walked deeper into the forest, trying to make as little sound as possible. However, the crunching of snow beneath his feet was hard to quiet. The noise had drawn the curious man deeper within the forest. 25 feet ahead, he located what he's been searching for. A pack of wolves surrounded something, tugging and pulling on it while whining in the process. From where he stood, and from what little details he could see, it's thought that an animal was being fed on. Raising his shotgun into the air, he pulls the trigger. The crackling blast sent the pack hightailing it out of the vicinity. Just out of reach, he noticed it wasn't an animal, but the unconscious body of a boy. Dressed in thick animal fur, he was buried under the previous snowfall. His lips and exposed skin have turned a faint blue, slowly succumbing to hypothermia. By his appearance, the man suspected he's from one of the native tribes. There's a faint pulse, and to his surprise, no bite marks have pierced the boy's skin. By the tears in his clothing, it looks like the wolves were trying to wake the boy and not eat him. When I was found, I was nearly dead. The chief's premonition couldn't have been more correct. Your great-grandfather and grandmother, for many years, were cursed with infertility, and to bear a child was something they had wanted so badly. Their prayers were finally answered when they found me. The couple's isolation from others kept me under the radar. My stay was only supposed to be temporary. Well, until my biological family was found. Fortunately for me, they weren't, and my temporary stay turned into what was to become my new life. As time passed, their love for me deepened without condition, and they came to accept that no one was coming to find me. They began homeschooling me, teaching not only academics, but the values and responsibilities of life. In return, I helped with the daily chores on the farm, learning through experience and routine. Of course, they questioned where I came from, but with my silence, they thought I was traumatized and didn't want to revisit something awful. They thought maybe in time when I was ready, I would speak of it, but that day never came, and soon enough it was forgotten. In his shelter with a small lamp lighting up the interior, Francis closed the leather-bound book. He had concluded in a day he would reach heaven's gate. Outside, the wind whips through the open land, bringing snow flurries along with it. In a state of deep sleep, he recounted the last piece of his conversation with the chief during his visit, vividly imagining the exact moment when he was in between his explanation of his travel and exhaling the smoke from the peace pipe that was offered. Days after my grandfather's death, which was just hours after he finished his story, I needed to know if there was any truth behind what he spoke. I found copies of old journals at the local library dating back to the early 17th century. They spoke of Captain William Westwood's ship, discovered adrift at sea with no trace of the men and women who had once sailed aboard. I came to believe the reason why my grandfather never spoke about his past was that it hurt him too much to bring himself back to that time in his life. Since I was the only family he had, and the executor of his will, I requested that his remains be cremated so I could return him to his rightful home. I dedicated my life to bringing his remains back to the Isle. I studied cartography, wildlife biology, and geology. Jesus, I even went on several humanitarian and wildlife missions in the most remote parts of the world, preparing for exactly this. There's a shuddering motion in his memory before the dream transitions. The holy man gently placed the foot and a half-long pipe at his side. But now you see there is indeed truth to what he spoke. The man lifted a skull-shaped bowl. Its contents held a white powder. He poured a portion into his palm, then looked up and blew the strange substance directly into Francis's face. While in his deep sleep, a flurry of vivid images flashed through his mind. Moments and impressions before he's drawn back to the ritual, right to the moment of his reaction and blackout. Lying on his back, his vision was blurry as the drums and chanting became more intense. The tribe's people stood around the man, but suddenly they shapeshift. They're not humans at all. Now they've transformed into greylings, their anatomy twisted into unnatural and unsettling forms. Their heads were larger than their small naked bodies, though there are no sexual reproduction organs visible. Their large eyes are completely black and only blink an eighth of the time that a human does. The length of their arms and fingertips ran down past their knees. There's a slight slit for a mouth and 2 holes for ear canals. The beings stand motionless, cocking their heads from side to side. Gradually, the slits of their mouths begin to widen. The lower part of their jaw unhinged, and exposed layers of razor-sharp teeth. Francis's current hypnopompic state felt so vivid, a nightmare that's in complete control. Extending their abnormally long arms, they reached for him. Their 4 elongated fingers with suction cups located on the underside reveal small retractable spikes. Gripping onto him from all directions, A stinging sensation is felt as the pointy objects pierce through his clothing and into his skin. Finally, he's able to wake up. He sweats profusely and gasps for air. Sticking his head out into the open, the rush of cold and fresh air fills his lungs, slowly bringing his heart rate back down. An obnoxious sound resembling wind turbines takes away the quietness of the polar night. Glancing up as a shadow casts over him, he observes the thunderbirds soaring overhead. Frightened and excited, he crawls out of the shelter with his eyes glued to the silhouette in the sky. The comparable size of the winged creature makes a condor look like a chickadee. With all the excitement, he realized that he wasn't documenting the mythical creature and hastened back to the shelter to retrieve his recording device. Thinking to himself that this exploration can end up being more profitable than predicted, not only will he own video footage that documents the discovery of the isle, which potentially holds an abundance of precious metals, now he will also have video evidence of one of the two creatures spoken about in mythical folklore. Noticing 3 sets of tiny childlike footprints coming and going from his shelter, the explorer keeps up his guard. Is anyone in there? If there is, you better come out, I'm armed. The man hopes his bluff will be enough to get the people out of his personal space. What he doesn't understand is how these people traveled through the snow silently and went unnoticed. He was only standing at most 20 feet away. The man called out again, but there was no response. Finding the courage, he hesitantly takes hold of the entrance flap. Counting in his head to 3, and in one swift motion, he peels the sealskin back. His shelter is empty, along with everything he had. The urn stood alone, prominently displayed at the center of the room. None of this makes sense. Is he still in the nightmare? Or better yet, is he in a nightmare within a nightmare? I want my stuff back, Francis yelled out across the open land. Packing his tent and urn in a frenzy, he pursues the thieves. About an hour later, while Francis followed the tracks leading towards the isle, the large bird disappeared over the mountains. The turbine sound generated by its wings dissipated, and the wind that howled dissolved, bringing dead air back to the land. Francis stood outside the mouth of the cave, looking at the footprints. He then looked at the symbol chiseled in the rock face, with the words Heaven's Gate underneath. It was exactly how it appeared in the book, and this was the entrance to the isle. Entering the dark cave, unarmed, and only equipped with a high-powered flashlight, the rush of excitement that had led up to this moment was completely gone. Every so often, he swears he sees figures of people in front of him moving in the distance, but they're always just out of reach of his flashlight. Continuing on the footpath and down a steep incline, small bone fragments are noticed. He crouched to examine what looked like a piece of human spinal vertebrae, likely all that remained after animal scavenging stripped the isle clean in search of food. In the middle of the tunnel, large pieces of gold and jade are scattered within the walls. Further down, the rare and precious metal named rhodium is also found in abundance. Francis hadn't left the area empty-handed, ensuring to mine some pieces big enough. This was compensation for his dedication all those years. Nearing the end of the footpath, a collection of remains lay scattered on the ground. These are no doubt human. Skulls and femur bones are distinguished as he walked through the remnants, unable to avoid them. Up ahead, he can see light. It must be the opening to where his grandfather called home. The travel seemed to go on forever before he finally finds the exit. A storm has now swept over the land. However, being entirely encased by the surrounding mountains and the previous month's sun still radiating its heat from the rocks, the vicinity stays at a comfortable temperature. The low cloud cover above the skylight opening makes it nearly impossible to see the isle. Up ahead and protected by a lake acting as a moat, just like Papa Ben said, lay the land of vibrant greens. Amazed, Francis approaches the water's edge, taking in the typography that is all around him. Noticing an object within the overgrowth of weeds, he finds 2 makeshift rafts made from small trees. Even though one's in better condition than the other, it's still in desperate need of repairs. Equipped with the 15-foot pole carved from a tree, Francis stood on a makeshift raft and proceeded to cross. Stopping in the middle of the lake, he took in the scenery. Docking the raft far enough on land so it doesn't drift away, Francis believed he had just stepped into the fishing community's territory. If the dock and small, rotted boats weren't enough to convince him, it became more evident when fishing equipment was unearthed from the small debris that covered them. There's an eerie silence and a feeling he's not alone as he continues on his course of direction. It made sense if Papa Ben was a part of the logging community. Their settlement would be closer to the woods. With nobody living on the isle, proper restoration couldn't be done to maintain the buildings and structures, causing them to become dilapidated. Nature has reclaimed the isle, slowly erasing the traces of human presence and taking back what was once hers. Vines crept over crumbled stone, and moss blanketed the forgotten paths. Continuing on what was left of a footpath, he passed by log cabins that were charred or collapsed from the decades of previous storms. Stepping on something hard that crunched under his boots, the explorer peered down, observing more skeletal remains. This boneyard would be a forensic nightmare, but an anthropologist's dream. Reaching the logging community and not knowing what cabin was Papa Ben's, he entered each one until the right residence was found. Unlike the rest of the people that are outside and who had to face the harsh elements over the decades and scavenging animals, Papa Ben's biological father's skeleton is held together by small pieces of decaying tissue. Those small pieces of his bones had fallen to the wooden flooring. Most of him was intact and sat sitting frozen in time. Placing the urn on a small homemade table that rested beside the bed, his bottom lip quivered while he wiped away the tears from his eyes. Francis cleared his throat so he can speak to his grandfather one last time. "After all these years, Grandpa, I finally got you back home. I know you wouldn't agree with what I was trying to do, and nothing can justify why I did it. But that's all changed now, Grandpa. I guess you can say this is one final story that we can share." From outside the cabin, the shuffling of footsteps is heard. That must be the thieves, he thought to himself. It was clear these weren't the footsteps of an animal. They sounded distinctly human, urgent, as if someone were trying to move from one point to another as fast as possible. These had to be the ones who took his belongings. He began to wonder if perhaps not everyone had remained frozen, as his grandfather had said. Perhaps after Papa Ben's departure, some of the others came too. But now they are scared and hide in fear that it may happen again. The possibilities his imagination mustered were endless. Hearing the sounds again, he approached the door. Peeking his head out, he caught a glimpse of a person's shadow running behind a neighboring cabin. The shape of the individual is too small to be an adult. It was more childlike. "Hello, is anyone there? I'm not going to hurt you. I just want my things back," he called out. Now standing outside the door, he waited for a response. Circling him are the sounds of footsteps. Though whoever they are, they stay out of sight, hidden within the structure's exteriors. Hearing the disturbance of leaves and branches, Francis directs his attention towards the forest. The vegetation's seen shuddering in a zigzag pattern. "I'm not going to hurt you," he yelled, running to the forest tree line. The leaves and the high underbrush sway, giving the man some type of direction. Running after the assailant, Francis found himself deep within the woods, and now the movements have mysteriously vanished. Standing quietly for some time, he listened to his surroundings, hoping to get an idea of where the person was hiding. Giving up the pursuit, he turned. Then, out of nowhere, there is a disturbance in the forest, and it's coming straight towards him. Out of the brush, a large brown bear charges at him. Stumbling, he falls back onto the forest floor in a crab-like position. Abruptly, the animal stops. The bear's momentum caused it to slide several more feet before standing stationary on all fours, now staring and snarling at the man. The fierce animal stood on its hind legs, letting out a powerful roar. Coming back down onto all fours, it snarled as saliva poured from its heavy jowls before it slowly turned, and left the area grunting. By now, Francis had nearly shit his pants and quickly retreated through the dense overgrowth. Exiting the tree line, he became frozen at the sight of a crowd of graylings. Human-like, but appearing otherworldly, they stand in silence staring at the man. Remembering the strange beings from his nightmare, he determines they are the same entities. Was his dream a premonition? Or is this unfinished business from his blackout when he was with the tribe? Francis trembles, frozen in fear. The beings don't move their feet, but every time he blinks, they get a little closer. It then became evident why the natives closed that entranceway to the tunnel. He was never intended to leave this place. Something moved quickly through the brush behind him. Certainly, it's the bear coming to finish him off. With everything in him, he's able to find a way to break free from his paralysis. Turning, he witnesses one of the beings rushing out from the forest and directly at him. The The being lunged with its long arms and odd-shaped hands. Before the creature could make contact, a cast of blinding white light shone through the aisle. And when the light vanished, the Greylings, along with Francis, had disappeared. Anchorage, Alaska, 2 years later. 2 nurses walk up a hallway in a psychiatric facility. One of the nurses is bringing the other healthcare worker, who is a new employee, up to speed on the patients who reside in that specific unit. The last man in this wing is our newest resident in the facility. You'll always find him in this room, staring out the window and into the courtyard. He came to us around 2 years ago. He was found in Barrow in the dead of winter, walking around aimlessly with no identification, and he was delusional. He had no recollection of his name, so we refer to him as John Doe. Right now, it's a mystery what his condition is, yet all the tests have yielded conflicting results. When he first arrived, it was diagnosed that he had a severe form of schizophrenia, but when the highest dose of medication was given, it only brought him down to a moderate level. Another test was done, and it contradicted that result. He was then diagnosed with dementia. So we don't actually know for sure. To be honest, we are trying our best to figure it out. The nurses now stand in the doorway to the spacious activity room. The room at the moment is empty, except for a man at the far end with long, straggly hair and an unkempt beard sitting in a wheelchair in silence. All we know at this moment is his mind is like a warped record. His mind is the needle, and his memories are the record. And when the needle hits the warped part of the vinyl, his mind replays everything all over again. Mind you, he's an ideal patient. He doesn't cause any problems. He'll only answer general questions. And just so you know, the most you'll get is a yes or no from him. The only 2 things you have to remember are that he won't allow anyone to cut his hair, and he becomes very agitated at the sound of drilling. He's a good storyteller. He has an overactive imagination. Maybe his stories are suppressed memories, the new employee suggested as the pair entered. The nurse snickered. When you hear his story, you'll see there's no truth to it. It's completely fiction. It's almost that time now, 3 o'clock. John tells the same story every day at the same time. We try to have someone with him so he has someone to tell. I think that's what we'll do today. You can get acquainted with John. The senior employee called out to John before introducing the new nurse to the wing. The man didn't acknowledge the women. He continued to stare into the courtyard, unmoving. This man was definitely Francis. Though looking into his eyes, he was completely gone. There's only a blank stare. Coinciding with the clock's hand striking 3 comes a violent twitch. The record's starting all over again. The senior nurse whispers and then winked. The wheelchair slowly turned toward the women. I'm so glad you ladies could visit me today. Please sit. I have a story to tell you. It's called the Eldritch Occurrence on Westwood Isle. The end.